once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another Force Friday edition. I'm just going to kind of touch on some of the theories that have been going on out there that I'm starting to actually kind of buy into. I'm still intending a kind of larger, grander scope kind of top 5 video like I did the last one, but I've just been kind of busy lately and haven't been able to get my notes completely together. So I figured I'd kind of throw this one together and just kind of put it out there. Just saw the movie again yesterday, and given some of the things that I've read, most of it is just kind of people banding about ideas online, and you don't necessarily buy into it completely. But when you go into the film with certain things in mind, you can almost see why they would be the case. And the top one that I'm really kind of starting to buy into is the fact that, it's not a fact obviously, but the idea that Kylo Ren is actually the one that may have dropped Rey off on Jakku. And a lot of people don't necessarily like that idea. They don't necessarily hold with the idea. But there's a couple reasons that I do kind of, I'm warming up to that idea more and more. Because the more you watch the movie, the more it kind of makes sense. Because obviously, whoever dropped Rey off, whether Luke is the parent, regardless of who are the parents, she had her mind wiped, because she's obviously received training of some sort, because you can't just come up with those kind of force powers out of nowhere and have an idea of how to use them. So obviously her mind has been wiped. Well, we've got clear evidence that Kylo Ren is fairly powerful in terms of accessing people's minds, controlling their minds, putting people to sleep, using the Force. He's got powers in terms of the Force that we've never seen on screen before. Now people are going to argue, oh well, but Luke uses the mind trick, so why couldn't Luke have put her to sleep? Well, anything's possible, but all we've really seen Luke do is the usual, you will do whatever. And that's controlling somebody. That's not necessarily going into their mind and erasing memories up to a certain point. The other idea that I bring into that makes sense in terms of it being Kylo Ren to drop her off is the fact that I still can't wrap my head around the idea that Luke would leave her on Jakku with a junk dealer. Now, obviously, Max von Sydow's character was on the planet. Perhaps Luke told him to go there and kind of keep an eye on her. We don't know what that relationship might have been like, if Rey even knew that he existed. But I just find it hard to believe that even in a time of crisis, that Luke Skywalker would have taken his daughter, his niece, his protege, whoever she is, and dropped her off on this planet with basically no plan in mind. It's like, here, Unkar Plot, take care of her, here's a few credits, here's a few whatever, watch over her. It's like, that just doesn't fly. Somebody who's Kylo Ren, who doesn't really care about the person overall, but couldn't bring himself to take her down at the time, that makes more sense. It's like, oh, I'm just going to drop her off on this planet, she'll be alive, outside of that, I don't care. Because obviously he's gone to the dark side, but perhaps not fully if he couldn't bring himself to kill his cousin, his sister, his friend, whatever she ends up being. So to me that kind of makes sense. The only thing that I've still kind of yet to work out is the timeline of it all, because I still find it hard to believe that if we're saying that Kylo Ren is around 30, give or take a year or two here or there, I'm still going with the idea that there's been about 15 years or so that he's been on the dark side. Well, that puts him at like 14, 15, 16 in terms of when he fell. And obviously, if they're trying to portray him up to be fairly powerful, even if you take the whining and whatever people want to complain about Kylo Ren out of it, using his powers, he's obviously reasonably powerful. And he's got the lineage behind him with being related to Anakin Skywalker. But being a teenager, I just don't know that he would be powerful enough to take down all of the Jedi that Luke could have brought to his cause. I mean, granted, they wouldn't have been much more trained than Kylo Ren would have been, But you're saying that he, along with the Knights of Ren, maybe, but they don't appear to be either Force sensitive or have lightsabers or what have you. They're able to kill all these Jedi, and he's a teenager, but then he can't kill Rey. That's the only part that's kind of a little bit difficult for me to grasp if we go with that idea, is you're saying basically that he was able to take down all the Jedi as a teenager and then take Rey away. And the age gap still doesn't make a ton of sense in that regard, because I think Rey looks like she's about 5, 6. I mean, I don't know that there's 10 years difference there. So again, that puts Kylo Ren maybe even younger. So that is still something that has to be ironed out going forward. But just given the fact that we don't know a whole lot about the entire situation, I'm starting to buy into the fact that I think that Kylo Ren was the one that dropped her off, and thus I think that kind of ties into my next one, because I'm starting to buy into the fact that I think more and more she is Luke's daughter, because I just, everybody wants to say, oh yeah, we can have this story about other families, but they've constantly said this is a Skywalker story. Nobody believes that Kylo Ren is going to be redeemed, or if he is, I think it would have to be in death. He would have to sacrifice himself for somebody. I mean, if you've set it up the way that I said you did, to where there's good in him, and he took Rey and put her on a safe place so that she wouldn't be killed, then you can slightly understand where he could come back to the light. But when you've killed off such a popular character in the way that he did, whether he did it on purpose or not, that's another theory out there, that maybe Han Solo did it to himself. I'm not sure I buy into that. I could kind of see it, but again, I can kind of not. But I just think that you have to have somebody on the light side of the Force to carry on the Skywalker lineage. I don't think that this can be a story about Kylo Ren if he's never going to come back. And then basically once you kill him off, there's no more Skywalkers, because Luke, even if you take it in a real world aspect, Luke can only be in the films for so long. I mean, that's just the tragedy of it. I mean, granted, if Mark Hamill's only in his 60s, he could potentially carry on for another 20, 30 years, but does he really want to do that? Do the filmmakers really want to do that? Does it serve the story to keep Luke Skywalker around that long, simply to have a Skywalker in the films? I don't necessarily think so. So I'm buying in more and more that it is Luke's daughter, and that he didn't know that she was alive, because you kind of go back to Maz's statement about whoever dropped you off on that planet is not coming back, and that could tie back into it being Kylo Ren, because that means that there's no coming back from the dark side for him, at least in her point of view. He could turn himself around, and because nobody thought that Vader was going to come back, Yoda didn't think so, Obi-Wan didn't think so, and they were very powerful in the Force, and they didn't think that Vader was redeemable, and then he did. So perhaps Maz doesn't think that Kylo is redeemable, but he ends up doing something in the future. We don't know about that yet. But she points to Luke Skywalker being there going forward. So maybe that just means that you don't have anybody coming to get you, but Luke Skywalker is still out there, and he is your future, and he is your family as well. That's kind of a stretch, I admit, but we don't know a whole lot, and we won't know a whole lot until Episode 8, maybe even 9. I hope that they don't stretch that out too far, but it'll be an interesting juxtaposition to see where they kind of take that versus where everybody thinks that everything is going to go. But I'm starting to kind of fall into the she's related to Luke by being her daughter kind of character, and that because that was something else that somebody brought up online. And I apologize for going into depth, just kind of randomly on different things. But somebody brought up the idea, with all that Luke Skywalker had been through, that it seems a little cheap to say, oh, well, one apprentice went rogue, so that just threw him into a mental disarray and he had to go escape. I don't necessarily agree with that completely, but I see where that's coming from. And if you say that he thought his daughter, who turns out to be Rey, was killed because Kylo Ren had taken her away, then all of a sudden you put yourself in a situation where it makes sense. It makes even more sense. It makes it more powerful that he felt that he had to leave, because not only did he fail the Jedi Order, not only did he fail his nephew, but he failed his family as well. He couldn't keep anybody alive, so he figures, I can't deal with this anymore. And if you give him a daughter, it makes it much more powerful. And then all of a sudden she comes back, and that makes his tears and his lack of being able to find the words, because he can kind of sense that this person is somebody to him. Perhaps he doesn't know officially that that's his daughter yet, but you could kind of see it in his face that something was there. And it'll be interesting to see if they follow through with that, or if this is all just a bunch of BS. That is A View from the Midwest, the Force Friday edition. What are your views on all the topics I talked about? Do you think that Rey is Luke's daughter? Who do you think she's related to? Do you think that, kind of going back and looking at things, do you think it makes any more sense that maybe Kylo Ren was the one that dropped her off? Maybe he couldn't completely go to the dark side, at least at that young age. That'll pretty much wrap it up for today's show. But until the next time, I'll see you then.